Happy Aramaic Fridays. Welcome to MindShifters Radio. I'm Michelle Cachet, and I'm here today with Dr. Tim Hayes. We warmly welcome you to the show, and thank you for choosing to be with us. Today is September 5th, 2014. Our call-in number is 646-200-4169. Press 1, and that puts you into queue to talk with Dr. Hayes. We encourage you to call in with your comments or questions, allowing you to actively strengthen and deepen your practice. So now let's welcome Tim and Dale in the process of learning and experiencing forgiveness.
Well, thank you, Michelle. And how are you today?
I am in process.
All right.
It was pretty
love for that.
intense. Thank you.
I'm sorry, what were you saying? You need what?
It was pretty intense at the intensive this morning for me. So, working through real deep layers of content, and Michael's been real helpful in coaching that, along with Rex and the support of the group. That's certainly the message of the day, that experiencing the initial power person with the loving support of a community like the radio show.
Well, thank you for being here, and despite the processing, and those of us who've been through that know it's very intense, and sometimes it's best to just hunker down and marshal your resources for doing your own inner work. And so I appreciate your extra effort for being here and monitoring the switchboard. And so we're here to talk about forgiveness, the process of undoing anything in my system that doesn't belong there. And the tool for that, primarily made available through the work of Dr. Michael Ryce and his wife Jeanie, is on the website at www.whyagain.org. The primary tool is called the Reality and Stress Management Worksheet. If you click on the link on the home page, in the center of the link of the page, there's a red and white bullseye, and it'll take you to a page where you can download Chapter 24 of Michael's book, and the most recent version of the worksheet process, and lots of links to audio shows where Michael has stepped people through that very tool, and you can get living examples of people with real problems applying this tool and reaping the benefits in their lives. And part of the keys to that tool come from the ancient Aramaic manuscript, the Khabouris Manuscript. And on Fridays this year, Dale Allen Hoffman has agreed to join us and talk about a variety of topics from the perspective of what the ancient Aramaic can add to our knowledge base about that, or give us a deeper understanding. So, Dale, are you there?
Dr. Tim, I don't see his phone number on the switchboard, and so I know he knows to press 1 to bring him up if he's using a different phone, and I don't see that either. So I asked Michael to text him.
All right. Well, in the meantime, we'll just talk a little bit about some of the things Dale has shared in the past to open the space for increasing our understanding of what has been handed down from the ancient Aramaic, translated by the Greeks and their culture, much of it lost right there, some of it lost in the politics of people who are trying to create an organization that allows them to have control over other people. I remember one of the things that I led a book club once, and they were reading the book, The Gospel of Mary Magdalene. And people in the book club said, well, do you think they suppressed her gospel just because she was a woman? And I said, no, I really don't think so. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, she was basically saying the same thing that Yeshua was saying, and they crucified him. So I think she got off pretty easy. And I think the reason they buried her gospel is because she remembered very clearly some of his teachings. She was probably his closest friend, if not his wife, and the idea is that in her gospel she outlines in the pieces that are available from the manuscript, she outlines 3 key points that if you accept these as fundamental teachings, then you can't really build a religion and call yourself the gateway to God and demand that people pay you money and go through your rituals in order to be happy. And the 3 things that she put out that I can remember off the top of my head in her gospel were, number 1, the kingdom of heaven is within you. If anybody tells you it's outside of you, they're setting you on a wild goose chase. Number 2, there is no such thing as sin the way it's being taught in the religions. There may be sin in terms of putting an error or an energy in your system that's off the mark. But in terms of breaking a law or offending some outside force or a God, there is no such thing. And the 3rd thing was, make no rules other than what I have already given you. So if you just had those 3 things from the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and if that was put out there in the public, then they couldn't make a massive religion. They couldn't have priests, and they couldn't have, the requirement that you tithe and all those other things to build this great organization. So if you go into the source material for any great teacher, you get a very different perspective than if you go at the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th generation away from that. Dr. Ryce was talking about this last Wednesday, and there was a book that I was reading, Disappearance of the Universe, and that book purports to talk about what's being said in A Course in Miracles. And Dr. Ryce mentioned he had somebody come and study with him, and the person said, "Oh, I understand your forgiveness process, and I know all about this worksheet process you have, and I rewrote it so it's better." And in the rewriting, in Michael's view, one of the key principles, one of the most important pieces to the forgiveness process was completely eliminated. So there's yet another example of, if you study the source material from any of the great spiritual traditions, you will get a very different impression than if you study the people who were the disciples of or who came a generation or 2 after, because people put a spin on it based on their personal filters. My little Guy Finley, he talks about it, and he says, most of the things that the great masters have done, they did because of their own shortcomings. They did because of their unique personal filters and what they needed to do. And their followers would often pick up a behavior or a ritual and not understand why the original teacher was doing it. And they would just repeat it because it's what their teacher did. And he gave as the example that at one point in his early spiritual career, he put duct tape on his mouth for a significant period of time. And he did that because he couldn't control his tongue. He couldn't slow himself down. Well, there are a lot of people who don't have any trouble slowing themselves down. As a matter of fact, their difficulty is speaking up and speaking their truth. So if somebody was trying to follow Guy Finley and said he was a great spiritual teacher, and they read a biography of him and said, oh, he put duct tape on his mouth, and they said, that's what I need to do. I need to go put duct tape on my mouth, without any understanding of why it was a specific need for that person to move through some of the layers of that person's garbage, then it's just a mindless repetition, and in some cases, potentially harmful to the person who wants to move to a new level of experience. So that's why we have such an affinity for studying the ancient Aramaic and trying to get a way to translate it directly into English. You know, we talk about this a lot, and we say that when it went from the ancient Aramaic into Greek, there were a lot of different words in the ancient Aramaic that had no corresponding words in Greek. They simply didn't understand the concepts, and because they didn't understand the concepts, they had no words for it. So an example is, and I don't know the whole list of them, but Michael often quotes that there were 17 different words in the ancient Aramaic that were translated by the Greeks all as the one word, love. So if you ask about that and you say, oh, so the ancient Aramaics had 17 different words for the word love. And the answer to that is no. They had 17 different concepts that the Greeks could not understand. And the closest they could get to an understanding was the one word of love. So imagine this. Imagine that we have a number of different substances that can function as fuel. We have white gas, we have kerosene, we have diesel oil, we have refined gas with lead in it, we have refined gas with no lead in it, we have ethanol, and we have a number of different engines that can function only on one or two of those different fuels. And someone comes along and says, what do I need to put in this engine to make it run? And you say, fuel. And they grab any old fuel and put it in the engine, and it destroys the engine or it runs very poorly. And they come back and they complain to you. And you say, well, I told you you just have to put in fuel. And they say, well, I did. I put in cooking oil. And you say, well, that's the wrong fuel. You need this other thing. And they don't have a word for this other thing. They have no ability to comprehend what ethanol means or what diesel oil. They've never seen it. They've never heard about it. The only thing they have is this one oil, and that oil seems to burn okay in several other applications, and they're all upset because it won't work in a particular, let's say it's a diesel engine. Imagine 17 different concepts that were critically important to understanding the human mind, the human body's energy system, our relationships with each other, and the Greeks had no awareness of them, and they collapsed them all into this one word, love, missing deeper meanings, missing entire patterns of interaction within the human being and within relationships. Well, that's why we like to go back to the ancient Aramaic. And we like to try to translate from the ancient Aramaic into English. The fact of the matter is there are many concepts in the ancient Aramaic, many words in the ancient Aramaic, that don't translate into a single word or even one or two words in English. In one of Dale's talks, he says that the first line of the Bible can be translated, validly translated, over 300 different ways. Now, if you don't know anything about a deep, rich language like Aramaic, then that won't make any sense to you at all. How could, please go over and pick up that box of Kleenex and bring it back to me. There's a sentence. Well, I don't care what language you use. How could that have 300 different interpretations or valid translations? Well, it can't. If it's a very simple statement, if it's a very direct observation about concrete events in the world. But as soon as we get into, I have great affection for you, I love you deeply, I would give my life for you, you mean the world to me, this is the most important thing in the world to me. Any kind of a statement that isn't instantly measurable and concrete, now it's open to all kinds of interpretations. And if I'm moving from a language that has very powerful words to describe multiple levels of understanding about an abstract concept, and I take that and collapse it down into a culture that only knows concrete, measurable, directly observable physical phenomenon, I lose volumes of material. And that's why we value someone like Dr. Dale Allen Hoffman, who's doing such research into the ancient Aramaic, and then going the next level, and not just sticking with the academic interpretation, but he's practicing it and testing it out and seeing which of these concepts, when actively applied in his life, make a positive difference. That's why he was lit up when he went to Dr. Michael Ryce's intensive center in Heartland back in 1995, and why ever since then he's been promoting the Reality Management Worksheet as the core tool to effectively implement the science and technology of forgiveness. And Dale says in several of his lectures, you can pray and you can meditate and you can chant and you can intone and you can have the best of intentions. And still, if you don't have a tool for removing the negative energies in your system, the traumatic energies, the energies passed down from generations, the anger, the fear, the hatred, the bitterness, the resentment, if you don't have a tool for removing those energies from your system, you can have all the best intentions in the world and still be stuck in a cycle of anger and bitterness and resentment and pain and hurt. So let's see if we have any hands up, any questions, or if Dale has joined us yet. What's happening in the chat room or on the switchboard, Michelle?
Thanks, Dr. Tim. Dale is here with us, and I'm having trouble turning his microphone on. Dale, I'm not sure if it's working yet. He's there. I see him on the board, but I actually, Dale, if you're listening to the show, could you just hang up and call in again, and maybe that will do the trick, because I've got the switchboard up and the hands. I mean, no hands up right now, but it's been refreshed, and I'm just struggling out here in the Ozark Mountains with cell towers, I guess.
All right, you want me to log on and see if I have any better luck here?
We could try that.
All right, I'll try that. And while I'm doing that, I will try to talk briefly about what we had Dale talk about last week, and the idea of...
Okay, the bell is going to ring now. Ready?
And we had the talk of hellfire and how it was presented as a negative thing, something to be run away from, something to be avoided.
I think I'm on now.
Dale,
hi.
Welcome.
Sorry. This is my third time calling in. I was on actually several minutes before the show, and I even actually took my hand down and put it back and put it down and put it back, and then called in a second time and tried it again, and then this is the third time. So I guess the third time's the charm. Hi.
Welcome. How's your week
But I've been
been?
listening to you the whole time.
So how's your week been?
It's been a good week. It's funny because you really hit on some sort of a theme for the week, which was that, just because we can, well, actually the best way to put it would be, I've been communicating with this guy who's in Ohio who I think he's Islam, I'm not positive, but he's been like asking me all kinds of like linguistic questions. Like literally when I logged into Facebook, I had 109 messages from him, and I almost never go on Facebook. I just don't have time to do it. My life is just too rich and full to spend my time on there. But anyway, he was saying that a professor of his was saying that Malkuta is incorrect. That the way that I teach that it's inside, that it's within you, that it's that the feminine is within, which is interesting because I just started thinking about how many times Yeshua was constantly saying, it's within you, it's within you. If you look here and there, low here, low there, it's not going to be there. It's within you. It's not in the sky because the birds will get there first. It's not in the sea. The fishes will get there first. And Pilatos, Pilate said, where's this supposed kingdom that you're a king of? And he's like, well, you can't find it in time or space. It's not a physical place. It's within you, and it constantly, like in the Gospel of Thomas where he says, the kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth, but men do not comprehend it. Or people say, when will the kingdom come? And he says, it's already here, but you do not comprehend it. That was 2,000 years ago, and I just thought I found humor in, a professor telling a student that it's not within when it's the very thing that he was completely focusing on. It's also... It brings a lot of light on the fact that Yeshua, why he was so ostracized and drug off to the side and, ultimately crucified, if that's what happened, because he was taking these teachings that people took for granted within Judaism, and he was opening them up and going much deeper and literally holding people to the fire, saying, look, if you don't live it, it means nothing. Just because you understand something intellectually from a book or the facts of what something can be defined as, all a fact really is generally is a commonly held belief system or perception. And when enough people hold that belief, it becomes very commonplace and widespread, so ultimately it becomes the truth or facts. And what that ultimately does is it, those facts can so easily remove us from the moment and what's actually being said because we're constantly forcing it into an old framework. And anyway, so it was I thought it was pretty intriguing that you hit on that this morning, today, this afternoon, whatever.
Wherever we are, yeah, it's one of the great things I value about the work you're doing is that you're working to make sure that things fit together instead of just taking a word and trying to make sure you know what the technical definition of that word is, but that it fits together within the greater context of the culture and the teaching and the person, and then that you try it out.
Yeah, I mean, we really, definitions, I think that one of the things I often say is it's time for us to get out of the classroom and start living it. I'm not saying stop learning, but what I am saying is live it. Put it into practice. If it doesn't work, then obviously your translation must be wrong. So I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated with the thought that here we are, however many thousands of years later that the word Malkuta was originally popped up, that we're still looking for something outside, some kind of a kingdom that is yet to come. And my focus isn't really on just what something meant in Hebrew or Aramaic. As a matter of fact, it's not really on that at all. My intent is to do to the best of our ability to communicate what Yeshua was really trying to communicate to us. And in so many cases, we know for a fact that he was going against the common everyday meanings within Judaism of terms that are basically almost taken for granted, and he was taking them and spinning them upside down and telling people, well, I don't really look at it that way. I think there's something much deeper going on here. And even to this day, here we are 2,000 years later, and people are still looking for some sort of outside kingdom and some sort of source of a God or a Messiah or something outside, rather than realizing that all of that what we are looking for is what is looking. We're looking outside of ourselves for something that's the essential nature of our being, and we're still doing it. It's like bless our hearts, in so many ways, we still haven't grown up in so many ways,
Well, and I couldn't agree more, and I raised some hackles with some statements a while back where I got on a little bit of a routine of saying, please try to remember that what this show is about the work. It's not about the amazing Dr. Ryce or the great and powerful Dr. Tim. It's about the work. It's not even about Yeshua. And if I read it correctly, he said, if I come in my own name, I'm a false prophet.
That's exactly
it's the Father within me that does the work.
We're looking outside of ourselves. We're looking that somehow someone else's connection to the divine, or should I say as the divine, is somehow going to free us, or is somehow our answer. We have to, like Michael says, from the teachings of Yeshua, we got to pick up our own cross. I'm just really intrigued that, I understand why people are still looking outside, because it's so much easier to look outside and say it's about Jesus or it's about some sort of outside source. And, for many years I would take certain things personally, like when I would be sometimes even like verbally attacked, cancel that thought, although it did and still happens occasionally, for having an opinion that was different than what every other person in general was thinking. And, I'm able to talk about it now with a smile on my face, not that I'm having pleasure in it, but I'm able to realize that if I'm triggering something, it's about whatever's in the person that's being triggered. And that's the very thing that needs to happen. I'm so ready, and I know that there's so many people that are ready, to get on with it. Let's get on with it. Let's start living this instead of just yakking about it. Let's get it out of the classroom and let's get it into the homes. That's why the work that Michael is doing is so important, and this show is so important. It's like, let's live it. That's what this is about.
Well, and as we've talked about before, and we were talking about it last Friday, sometimes living it isn't always so pleasant. And we're talking about how Michelle started the show today and said she's in process, and she's had a rough morning, and fortunately, she's at a place where there's lots of love and support. But there's lots of love and support for her to look at the really unpleasant, painful stuff she's carrying around inside of her. Just like last Thursday on the show, I had to do a little standing in the fire myself, because there was a big, big part of me that didn't want to do the worksheet in the first place, and then didn't want to tell Michael about it. And it's that discomfort and that urge to run away from or take a logical action on something outside of myself to try and resolve the feeling inside of myself that creates that heat sensation or that fire or that burning. And being able to sit in that and put my conscious logical mind on the shelf and ask for help from somewhere else is the only way I've ever found to get through that and come out on the other end a different order of person. And that's always my goal, because I love the way Guy Finley talks about it. At one point he says, you can look at every distressful, every uncomfortable, every unwanted moment in your life as though it were the world saying to you, hey, Tim, would you like to see what's keeping you from knowing me and loving me more deeply? And whatever that is going to be difficult for me to look at. And when I do, I feel that burning, I feel that pain, I feel that heat, whatever you want to call it.
And therein lies the work, is that if you don't get that what's triggering is in you. You just don't get it. That's why I say it all the time. I'll say it again, which is that I'm so grateful. I feel such a gratitude and honor to have started with what forgiveness is really all about, rather than learning something in some kind of classroom and then indoctrinating other people with a belief system. And I'm literally telling people, for God's sake, don't listen to me. I mean, don't believe what I'm saying. Try this stuff. Do it. Put it into practice. See what happens. And what happens, though, is when, the stuff hits the fan, or as Michael would say, when the stress is up and the chips down, it's just so much easier to just pull the plug out of the wall rather than actually go into that process of paying attention to my breathing, realizing that when something hooks or snags, that something's resonating within me, and being able to recognize what's being triggered that was already in there, and being able to be conscious enough to identify whatever that goal was that I had that allowed that to be triggered up, and say, hey, wait a second here, let me cancel whatever I was thinking I needed to communicate, or some sort of end result or manifestation in the moment, so that I can actually be open in the present moment. Because if we're not open in the present moment, we're not able to let go of those belief systems, there's just no chance for that. And, that's the catch, is that if people haven't learned that process, they're going to literally mistake their belief systems or whatever it is that's resonating within them as the truth. And that's the funny thing about how 10 people can be at the same car accident, and they all describe a different color car, different hair color, and you start wondering if any of those people were actually there at the same time during the accident, because all of their descriptions are so incredibly different and far apart from each other. And, wow, it's just an interesting process of how I see still so many of these beliefs being laid on top of a lot of these ancient philosophies that are so clear if you've got eyes to see. And it's not about being right or being wrong. It's about either you're open in the process, you're open in the moment to being that open channel, or you're closed down. And if you're stuck in some sort of belief, you're closed down. And beliefs are fine. They're part of what happens in the human body, in our consciousness. But just to be open, that's still my word. It's been my word for many years now, and it's still my word, open, open, open. If I can only focus on one word, it's being open. And then, of course, people will say, well, doesn't that make you pray to some kind of outside, some sort of outside powers of making you somehow vulnerable? It's like, well, guess what? There is no outside power. There's not.
And there's no outside.
Yeah, that's it. The implicate is the explicate. The inside is the outside.
Well, let's ask Michelle if anyone has a hand up, if any of this conversation has sparked a question in the chat room, or someone with a hand up.
Nobody has a hand up right now, but Dale, I did have a question in anticipating the show today, because actually the intro, I'm glad you heard it, because Dr. Tim was reflecting on the different meanings of love, and that the Greeks didn't have the ability to understand the concepts behind the definitions. And what I've come to learn is there's 17 different words for love in Aramaic. And we're really familiar with Rakhma, the all-encompassing love, and the love that is over intentions. And then Kuba, the love that is over the perceptions. But I was wondering if you could share any other known definitions for some of the concepts between the other 15 words that are out there for love.
That's a good question that I'd have to really get in and research, because I've never counted them, and I'd have to go looking into it. There's certain, you've got Kuba, you've got Rakhma. There's words like Muhaba, which is also Arabic, but Muhaba really is based on Kuba. And then you've got Khub, which is also, or Khabou, which is Kuba. So I don't even know if there actually is that many words for love. I'm not sure where Michael heard, heard the number, but I do know one thing is that there's probably, much like with the translation of the word Amen, as not only amen, as we would say in English, which is just a really bad pronunciation, but also Amen was the word verily, verily, verily. There was no such thing as verily, verily in the time of Jesus. That's a Middle English concept. Or assuredly, which is again English. That word did not exist at that time. So many things that's going to happen in translations, and that's why I think it's so important that people realize that when you're looking at a translation, there's no such thing as a perfect literal translation. It'll never exist because there's just no way to get the direct experience of another person into our own state of awareness. We are each our own point of entry. That's why I think it's so important that we're focusing so much on, especially here on the calls and in the work that Michael and I do, on connecting into what Yeshua was speaking of being connected with rather than obsessing over and over about a lot of the words that he was saying. But one thing I can do is look into it. I've been asked that question before, and I've looked into it a lot of times, and I've never come up with that many words. Even if I go, as an example, and put it into a lexicon, like some sort of electronic or printed lexicon that I have in Aramaic, it won't bring that many up either. So
Dale, let me just say that, to my understanding, the way Michelle is talking about it right now is one of the problems, and that is to assume that all of these different words were different words for love, because even Rakhma and Kuba are not words that mean love. Rakhma means a filter in the mind over intentions, and Kuba means a filter in the mind over in perception. But that's not the same as love, as the all-encompassing energy.
Yeah, you know what's funny, too? I mean, most scholars that study Semitic languages, including many experts of Aramaic, don't actually have almost any grasp whatsoever on the difference between Rakhma and Kuba. Kuba to them means a love that you make or spark, which is part of it, for another person, and Rakhma is generally just regarded in the scholarly field as the word for friend, and that's as far as they've gone. They're not able to, it's not that they're not able to, they're not interested in digging down deeper. They just rest on that, and that's really why I think it's so important that we're constantly cracking and shattering our biases from the day before and being open and being open and being open. I don't know that so much that she asked a great question. I think it's a great question. But honestly, I think I would have to sit down and look at lots of different Bibles to be able to pull that many words that were translated as love out. And here's the thing, too, is that in a lot of cases, it's not, a lot of those probably wouldn't even be there in the Greek. I'm only aware of maybe 4 or 5 words in Greek: agape, eros, philia, storge, which is more of an affection, but yet I hear people talking about a lot of different Greek ones too. So I don't know. There's a lot of words, and what you say actually is very accurate, Tim. Also, that there's a lot of words that are translated as love that aren't necessarily. A good example would be the word mohaba that I said, which is in Arabic and it's in Aramaic. Mohaba, of course, hub, you hear it right in the middle, huba, it's right there in the middle, which means a spark. And what that means, mohaba actually it can be translated as love, but what it really means is an absolute destruction. The word would be Holocaust. And what's interesting for Holocaust is we think Holocaust is somehow this big bad thing because we think of Hitler, but what Holocaust means is the absolute obliteration, destruction, disintegration of anything that is a veil, that is a block to the direct light or the direct love of the One, of Allah. And we can translate that as love, but it's still, love is just an interesting word. So I think I would have to go and dig into a lot of different sort of books to see what was translated where, because literally, as far as I'm aware of, the only 2 words that are really directly translated as love in Aramaic are just Kuba and Rakhma. Or technically, it's not really pronounced Kuba, it's technically pronounced Khabou, but just a little linguistic thing.
Well, Dale, that's really helpful. I I know about those, like Philia and Eros and the four kind of main Greek for brotherly love and like romantic love, and so that's what I was assuming the Aramaic had more like distinctions about, like, well, this is a kind of love that you have for your brothers, and this is the kind of love that you have for your family, or so. I guess if you, when you said you're going to dig into it, maybe there's more to offer at some later point.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep looking. That's the thing, like, as I was saying, too, like Khuba is that one that where technically the way most scholars, the most they'll be able to eat on that or accept on that is that there's not necessarily a feeling of love there, and that you create a spark there. You set, I don't want to even use Michael's words. I'm going to stay away from them and just basically, in this case, because all that you're going to get from most scholarly minds is it's creating or somehow making, which of course isn't even possible, somehow creating a love that's not there. And the khub sound in Aramaic literally means to fan the flame of something, and the u sound in khuba or khabu, the u means action. It literally means that you're acting something out. So you're creating a spark and like fanning that flame. And then in Rakhma or Rakhma or Rakhme, the thing about that is that's generally the word translated as like loving in terms of friendship, or it could be mercy or compassion. And that's as far as a lot of people want to go. And I'm like, that's fine. Sure, it means compassion. It means mercy. That's fine. You know, it means empathy. That's fine. But how do you live it? What does it actually mean? I'm not interested in the definition, and that's why I think it's a great question. Like, what are the words in Aramaic? But like I say, I'd have to really go through and look at other people's translations and see where has the word love popped up. And, you know, but it's funny, like if I go searching in Aramaic things, it only brings up the two. But that doesn't mean that other words weren't translated as love. So that's kind of what I'm saying, which I think is what Tim was hitting on and as well.
Yeah, the idea is that there are other more complex concepts other than simply love, as we talk about love, that the Aramaic teachers understood and the Greeks didn't. You know, akin to the concept of the Uta brain cells, or the knowledge of an unconscious dynamic, which then just disappeared from, you know, our awareness until Freud came up. Well, clearly they understood different things at a very complex level about how our mind and our bodies and our energy systems work than we did in the 19th or 20th centuries.
Yeah, and on a lot of cases, if you talk about a lot of that, I find it intriguing that a lot of times when you talk about it on the level of the subconscious, the unconscious, and those deeper levels of, like, what are the direct experiential meanings of a lot of these words that Yeshua was trying to communicate with, people will just shut you down and they'll say, no, you're lying and you're making it up. I've always been fascinated by that because to me, that's literally telling me that, look, if there's not an open, if you're not able to have an open dialogue with me about why you make that kind of judgment or whatever, then you're actually showing me that either what you're working with is either a bad translation, or you don't understand it, or it simply doesn't work. It's got to be one of those three things. And I literally say all the time, you judge a tree by its fruit. If someone has some sort of philosophy that they're so sure is right, but they're still fighting some kind of enemy outside, and they're doing this thing where they're constantly fighting some sort of external power to shut somebody up because their belief system is different than mine, whatever that is, then I really, truly, I'll sort of kind of listen to what someone has to say, but if they're still fighting some kind of outside enemy, I'll be honest. I mean, I've gotten to a point where I almost don't care what those kinds of people that come attacking me, I don't care what they have to say anymore, really, because if what they had to say was valid, the attack couldn't happen. Do you understand what I'm saying? And that's so much, again, that also, since you brought up the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, she talks about I believe it's in the fourth power, she talks about the powers of wrath or hostility. And the thing about the powers of wrath and hostility is that it's a quality of when you don't have your energy system in an open breathing mode, an openly functional mode. She was talking about the 7 chakras, which of course were horrifyingly translated as 7 evil demons that were somehow cast out. But in talking about that, she talked about when you're not open and the system is not openly circulating and you've got all these veils and things that are blocking, all these different bushel baskets that are masking that light, then you're not open. And what happens is when someone resonates that bushel basket, you attack. And in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, she actually called it the seven qualities, or the 7 masks. I'm trying to think of the exact word that she used. Powers, the 7 powers of wrath and hostility. And that's what happens when you're closed down and you're not open and you're locked into all these beliefs, ideologies, belief systems, which is all part of being human. But when you addict yourself to those and become addicted to them, you create biases, you're no longer open. And when someone actually comes with the truth, like Yeshua says, when 2 people who are without sight in the same room, they are no different from each other. In the same room with no light, there's no difference. But when the light comes on, the one who is blind will continue to be blind, while the one who has sight will see. And that's the very thing. You can be right there in the presence of a direct experiential truth, and I mean truth with a capital T, of a direct experience of something, and people may still go after you, and they still may want to attack because they're not even really looking at you. They don't even see you, even no matter how much of a depth of truth you may have and are living in your life through the fruits of your life. All that's really happening is their junk that's inside of themselves is shaking loose, and they're projecting that on their brain's image of you. But since they don't understand what forgiveness is, they have absolutely no chance whatsoever until they learn what that forgiveness means. They have no chance whatsoever of being in an open dialogue. So it's the one thing with anyone that has any kind of truth of any kind or any kind of other viewpoint whatsoever. So I've really kept it in mind. It's like, I'm open to what you have to say, but if someone comes in on an attack level, if something's resonating for me, I'm going to look at that. If I'm able to look at that person and I have a smile in my face and I realize this thing is completely their thing, I keep my heart open, but at the same time, I'm not really all that interested in what they have to say, because obviously what they have to say is inaccurate because they're coming from all this hostility. If we could just understand that, that if we feel the urge to bite the hook, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but we're going to create the result of that, which is that something's going to trigger up in response to that. But that's it. So many don't really truly understand what forgiveness is. I was just listening to a class a couple of weeks ago that of someone who does work, with the word forgiveness in it, and they literally, took Michael's worksheet and just changed some of the words, and which was fine. But what was interesting to me was there was no identification of the goal, and there was no canceling of the goal. It was literally using words like, I let you off the hook and let myself off the hook. And I'm like, my God, my heart fluttered, because I'm like, that's not forgiveness, that's pardoning. So, I mean, there's even people that
Dale?
get the tool and then morph it. So, yes.
What's so amazing about everything you just said is that was Dr. Ryce's morning lecture in the last day of our intensive here at Heartland, and it's amazing. All the concepts are similar in the words you use, from addiction to the attack to the inability to take the feedback and make that person wrong because of hallucination, and on and on and on. So I wanted to share that and just interrupt for a second because we've got about 10 minutes left, and there has been a caller waiting for a while.
Okay. I didn't realize we had gone so far already.
Area code 541. I hope I can turn on your mic. I don't know if area code 541 is on. Dale, yours was spiraling, and you managed to be able to talk, so I'm hoping...
I think 541 I think that might be Julie out in Ashland.
Yeah, it is. Hi.
Aha.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
I hear you.
Oh, good. Hi. You hear me, but Michelle might not. Well, that's okay. Hello. Hi, everyone who hears me. You know what? I know somehow on some level that everything you're saying relates to what I'm going to say, and the words are not it. And I'll use words anyway. I have noticed, and I hate this. Okay, I don't love it. Okay, I need to accept it. What I do is, when I'm not wanting to do the work myself, the true work, like you said, that port of entry or portal of entry, we each are. Yeah. The behavior I do instead is I go out into the world and try to get others to understand the work so that they can do it. And I try to convince them that this is worth doing. And when I'm coming from that place of not having done the work myself, I'm really ineffective. And all I do is trigger stuff in them. But when I come from having healed myself recently, from having done the work, I'm flowing differently. I don't have the same need or the goal with the other person for them to get it or do the work. Instead, it's just more of a sharing of what they want. And
that's so vital.
Easier.
That's vital when you can recognize that, you're open, because you don't have it's not that a goal is a bad thing, but it's that when we clutch the goal, especially when we clutch it unconsciously, and we don't realize that there's something we're seeking to get across, what'll happen is if we don't act, it's kind of like if someone comes up and tells me that my mother had green skin. I'm not really going to fight all that much, because I remember my mother quite well, and I know her skin was not green, and I could show them photos, so it's not going to resonate anything for me. However, maybe, for example, I was, let's say I'm 7 years old, and my mother was gone in my life, and I only saw her once, and it just happened to be at sunset, and the way the sun was hitting her skin didn't look quite normal. And someone says, well, did you realize your mother's skin was green? And maybe I would find offense in that. I don't know. But it's like when you are in the experience and there's no question anymore, there's no more goal or some sort of bushel basket mucking up the process, you're open and there's nothing to hook. So I know exactly what you're saying, too, because when we start to argue, it's really just the revelation that we don't know what we're talking about, not really. And that's fine.
Yeah.
It's a human thing,
It's true. It's true. That's true, too. I feel my own lie, my own falsification of what I do know is true, but because I'm not experiencing it, I'm not in the truth of it, so I'm making up whatever about it, and that does a disservice more than a service.
Yeah, and do you feel it? I mean, you can probably... once we start waking up, we can feel ourselves when we go in. A good example would be like a story. Something happened, and as the more awake you become, as soon as you go into embellishing, like as an example, something happened like a week ago and you almost got hit by a car, as soon as we start to go into embellishment, when your energy's a little lower and you start embellishing that and making things up, of course when we're younger it's something that happens a little more commonly probably, but I know full-grown people that just make stuff up and whatever, that's fine. But the more awake you become, the higher your vibration, you instantaneously start to feel that you're going off of truth. You realize that you're not having that open, direct experience anymore because now you have a goal to somehow communicate or convince or somehow inject someone else with some kind of a belief that you're trying to getting across to them. But yet if we could just let ourselves be open in those kinds of moments like that, or a moment of something that we're literally trying to communicate something to someone for their own good as we would think it to be, if we could just let go and just be open in the moment, whatever we need to say, it's always there. It's always there. And maybe sometimes there's nothing to say. Maybe it's just silence. But it's such a beautiful place for you to even be able to recognize that, because so many people may not even get to that point.
Well, you're reminding me of something you said a few weeks ago. You were quoting Luke 12:12 and the scriptures around that about for the disciples not to worry, that they would be filled with the right things to say.
Yeah, and we got into that great discussion, like as an example with Michael about like how, the conscious languaging, and I was like, I look at conscious languaging much differently because not everybody's going to just be able to be completely open in any moment. So the good thing about conscious languaging is you can actually lay some things out for people that when the stress is up and the chips are down, they all they can get out is these words that they've practiced 1,000 times. And the words come out, that whatever it is that your conscious languaging may be, because that's the one thing that happens, as each of us grows and grows and grows. Like, as an example, I can be out talking to 100 people and just throw something out wide open, full volume, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to receive that full volume. And it doesn't mean that if I'm in the audience of whatever great speaker that I'm going to receive everything that they're saying full volume. Our energy goes up and down. We go into higher consciousness. We go into a lower consciousness. The bushel baskets are resonating, or we're open. Sometimes we feel tired. Sometimes our lunch was a little too heavy. We got to remember that and sort of cut everyone slack, because we're not cutting ourselves slack, to realize that if we get into that sort of heal the world mode, which I've done so many times in my life, it's a great reason to say, oh, well, I'll get to my own stuff later, because this is my stuff, because I'm healing everybody else. And what a trip that can be,
Yeah, it's like that's really the only thing that needs to be done, and how much I resist, even when I think, well, I get over my resistance and I'm fine, but it always comes back. So,
yeah.
Anyway, it's a beautiful experience. Thank goodness we have the options.
Choices. That's exactly it. We've got them. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dale. I don't know if anyone else is with us, but I'll let you continue if you have a way
Julie.
back to the show. Oh, okay. Hi, Tim.
Thanks, Julie and Dale, and that brings us pretty much to the close of another show. And it's whatever. I got about 2 minutes left, I think. Do you have any announcements you want to make about upcoming events, Dale?
Well, I do. I'm going to be in Oswego, Illinois, the weekend of, it's the middle of September, 19th, 20th, 21st, at a place called the Intuitive Angel, for a whole weekend of events, a Divine Feminine Toning Circle. Then I'm doing a full day, I don't remember exactly what the title was, Myth, Mysticism, and Universal Love, or something like that, the teachings of Jesus, including the Mary Magdalene and Isis connections. And we're going to do a full-day event there, digging really deep in. And it's an event I've never done before, where I'm going to pull together, over the course of about 6 hours with a huge lunch break in the middle, I'm going to pull together a lot of what I feel are the most important essential teachings of Yeshua that, for the most part, people aren't getting. I'm really excited about that. My retreat just sold out about a week ago. And, I'm going to be all over the place in the rest of the year, Florida, New Jersey. I can't even remember half the places I'm going to be, but just go on my DaleAllenHoffman.com. There's a lot on there. It shows my schedule as well.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here on the call, in the chat room, and please join Michael again on Monday. In the meantime, try the tools. Put the pen to the paper, do some breath work, do some toning, and have the best year yet, everybody.